John here. Y Combinator is known as the world's best startup accelerator. It's a program that currently funds startups with $125,000 for 7% equity in the company, and it basically teaches the founders of the startups how to scale their business and become successful. The accelerator is run by people who've already had major successes with business, and some of the companies that went through the program and then went on to be quite successful include Airbnb, Stripe, Dropbox, Reddit, Twitch, Zapier, GitLab, Monzo Bank, Codecademy, Heroku, HelloSign. Basically, if you have a tech startup and you want it to be successful, Y Combinator will give you a really good shot at that. I applied to Y Combinator's previous batch with my tech startup about 6 months ago. We were only 2 months in and we had little more than an idea. We didn't get into that last batch because the application was a little weak. We didn't have anything developed, no minimum viable product. We didn't have any users. We were missing a member of the team with some expertise that we needed. This week, I submitted our second application to Y Combinator. This video is about what I did differently, how I improved this application compared with our first Y Combinator application. Of course, I haven't heard back from Y Combinator yet because I only submitted it a few days ago, and it is more than likely going to be rejected again because they get tens of thousands of applications for just 100 spots, but you never know. Plus, about half of the companies that Y Combinator accept are on their second, third, or fourth, or even more applications. Half of the people who get accepted in each batch are re-applicants. Alright, let's get into what I did to improve this application. If you want to support me and the channel, please hit that like button. It's free to do, and I'll really appreciate it. First and foremost, I submitted the application on time, within their on-time window. YC accept applications year-round, but they have 2 windows per year when they want you to send the application in. They accept applications any time of year because they're basically an investment fund and they don't want to miss out on the opportunity to invest in a great company. Regardless, submitting on time does give you an advantage over those people submitting late, like I did with our first application. And the reason is they have about 100 spots to fill on the program. Once you get past that on-time application deadline, they start inviting people to interview, and then the people who are successful from the interviews get allocated one of those spots. So if you submit an application late, you're competing for fewer spots because they've already filled some of them. So after making the error of submitting late last time, I made sure not to make that same mistake again. Also, because they applied on time, I had enough time before the deadline to go through it multiple times, reread it over, cut out bits ruthlessly that weren't entertaining, weren't engaging. It's very important with these Y Combinator applications to make your answers concise because they get over 10,000 and they have to read those in just a few months. If yours are just waffling on, they're going to get bored and they're going to get rid of it. Y Combinator don't give this little piece of advice in many places, but they want to know that the founders of the companies that are applying can support themselves financially in creative and entrepreneurial ways. I read somewhere that Airbnb's founding team supported themselves financially in the early days by coming up with their own cereal, where they'd hand fill each of the cereal boxes that they'd had printed, and then they'd sell that cereal as some kind of special edition, limited edition cereal box. And when Airbnb's application was being considered by the Y Combinator partners and they read this about the cereal, apparently that was it, they were in. So that's the kind of thing I've sprinkled through our Y Combinator reapplication. Myself and Jake, another one of the founders of our tech startup, have both made money from entrepreneurial ventures. I had a short-term rentals company that you'll know about if you've watched some of my earlier videos, interestingly an Airbnb business, but I actually sold that business last month to get a bit of cash to support myself while working on this tech startup full-time while living at home. And Jake earns what I would call shed loads of money, because he makes music that he puts online and then sells licenses to it, and he's doing pretty well from that, supporting himself while also living at home. So I hope that the Y Combinator partners appreciate that. I better estimated how much money we're going to make. In our first application, I wrote the equivalent of 2 A4 pages going into loads of detail about how if there were this many people in the market and we could capture just 1% of that, we'd make this much money, using loads of precise calculations. Turns out that was a mistake. Investors don't like it when you say if we could get just 1% of the market, because that doesn't really mean anything. You might end up getting none of the market, or you might end up dominating and getting like 80% of the market. So just arbitrarily saying if we get 1% doesn't really mean much. It's much more useful for investors to know how much your closest competitors are currently making. That's actually happening. It's not what if, it's what they're actually making now. So if your nearest competitor is making a certain amount of annual revenue, you can know that if you're making a competing offering that is superior, you could siphon off all of their customers, and those customers are willing to pay what they're already paying, so you can effectively have that same annual revenue. In our case, I found a reasonably similar competitor that was making about $100 million a year in revenue. Y Combinator, just like any investor, doesn't want you to hide the problems, the obstacles that you know you're going to face when you're trying to launch your startup. They want to know that you know what your obstacles are going to be. If they can can think of some significant obstacles that you haven't mentioned anywhere in the application. That's not going to reflect very well on you. So in our reapplication, I focused more heavily on an obstacle that I knew we're going to have, but that I only touched on lightly in the last application. And that is the problem of the chicken and the egg. Our application is going to be sort of like a marketplace where you need to have users to make it good, but you can only get users if it's good. So I wrote in detail about our creative strategy of how we're going to get users in the first place, how we're going to solve that chicken and the egg problem, which involves creating a YouTube channel where we have entertaining videos that raise awareness of the app. I proved that all of us on the team work well together. By applying again a year and a half later with the same idea, the same team, but with progress made, I've proved that we work well together because the team hasn't broken up. Surprisingly, the number one reason why startups fail isn't because the idea is terrible or because the company runs out of money. It's because the founding team breaks up, either because they've had a falling out or because some of the founding members move on to work on other projects that they're more interested in. So in your Y Combinator application, make sure to highlight how long the founders have known each other, the fact that you've done loads of projects together, that you're really tight, you've got a lot of history, and that you're unlikely to just one day decide that you don't like each other and don't want to work with each other anymore. In this application, I was able to talk about a close competitor. We couldn't find any even remotely similar competitors for our first application because it's a novel idea. There's a question in the Y Combinator application that asks who are your closest competitors, and we just couldn't give a very good answer because we couldn't find any. However, in the last few months, a competitor launched with an idea that's reasonably similar to ours, which made us panic a little bit at first, but then we realized it has some fundamental problems that our solution won't have. I was able to talk about how that competitor launched with backing from a whole bunch of big, well-known, respected venture capital funds, and that is only good for our idea because it's a very similar idea that must make our idea more investable. Hopefully Y Combinator to see it that way. And last but not least, this time we had a demo video. Because we had a minimum viable product almost finished, I had something to show. It doesn't have loads of functionality because it's a minimum viable product, but it looked great. Y Combinator love demos. It's something a bit more interesting for them to look at rather than just blocks and blocks of text, so it breaks up them absorbing your application. It also means that they can visualize what you're visualizing. If you just describe it to them using words, it's very unlikely that they're going to be envisioning the same thing that you are. And also, even though you've talked the talk in the application, a demo proves that you can design and build something without outside help. Hopefully my experience of applying to Y Combinator 2 times now will help you write either your first or subsequent application. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please hit that like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell if you want to see more videos like this. If you want some free stocks or crypto, there are links down in the description. Thank you again for watching. This is Debt to Millionaire.